Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to hear the conversations around the table, and I hope you've had an opportunity to talk about, from your personal experience, some of the issues that we'll be talking about today. I want to invite our three panelists to join me on the platform. We're going to give them a moment to introduce themselves, but if you look in page 4 of your program, you'll see more detailed biographies on each of our panelists, and they are a great group to have help us roundtable this topic today. My name is Jim Priest. I'm CEO of Sunbeam Family Services, and I'm a recovering attorney. According to Shannon and the OK ethics rules, there's no preaching, no self-promotion, no politics, and no profanity. And so the profanity problem isn't a problem for me, but the other three, I will have nothing to say the rest of the afternoon. But we're going to introduce you in just a second to these panelists, but the overarching topic that we're going to talk about may strike you at first glance as how do those two topics dovetail? The topic of ethics and the topic of mental health. But I think you'll see as we go through, and probably from your own experience, once you think about it, you'll see how they do dovetail, and we have terrific ethical considerations and sometimes conflicts that come into play when we're dealing with mental health issues in the workplace in particular. And that's what our focus today is going to be, mental health issues in the workplace. One of our panelists is unable to be here for a happy reason. Ted Struley, who is with the Journal Record, is receiving an award today from SAMHSA, a National Mental Health Association, for his work with the Colby Foundation. But Ted was good enough to do his part of our panel by videotape. And so we're going to let Ted introduce himself, and then we'll turn to Kelly, Morale, and Peter. So, Darren? That's got to be the world's briefest self-introduction. Let's see if our panelists can match that. Kelly Dyer-Fry.
Mine might be just a little bit longer. I'm Kelly Dyer-Fry, I'm editor of the Oklahoman, but I'm also the mother of a struggling heroin addict. I always shock people when I say that, but it shouldn't be a shock because it affects many, many, many of us. In fact, 1 in 10 people can be dealing with that problem. But also as the editor of the Oklahoman, we write about addiction and mental illness continuously because it crosses over so many problem areas of our state, from the overcrowded prisons to domestic violence to our bulging foster care system. And we need to address it better in Oklahoma than we're doing. And we cover that a lot. So I have a personal interest in it, as well as professional, because I always like to see our state do better.
Very good. Thanks, Kelly. Dr. Morale Krishna.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting us. My lifelong dream as a child was to become an engineer and work with the National Aeronautical and Space Administration. And it was going on well until the age of 9, when my loving mother suddenly became very ill with what we now call as a mental illness or brain disorder. So that changed the course of my life for the last 55 years or so. I have been spending time about mind and brain and mind, body, spirit, and what's the scientific basis of these disorders, as well as how can we access to the healing power of these things. So I'm the founder of the James L. Hall Center for Mind, Body, and Spirit in Oklahoma City for the last 20 years. And also currently I'm a senior consultant in mind, brain health and Integris Health. And I also teach at the OU and play various other roles. Thank you.
Thank you. And Peter Dobelbauer.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Peter Dobelbauer, but before I say anything else, I just want you to know that we have a real treasure in Oklahoma in Dr. Krishna. And I'm just so glad that you could be here today, and we really appreciate it. I've been general counsel. Yeah, thank you. Next month, I will have been general counsel with Hobby Lobby for 20 years. And next week, if I don't have a drink between now and then, I'll be sober 28 years. Now, I will say this is the first time in my sobriety that I've ever announced that to 300 people. And believe me, and this goes along with what we're talking today, it's still not easy for me to do that. But we have a real problem, and we have a real problem in Oklahoma, and it's very difficult to deal with. Serving as general counsel for Hobby Lobby, I see this oftentimes, and that balance between taking care of the employer and taking care of the employee is a tightrope many times. And hopefully today we can pull back the veil a little bit and maybe give you some ideas about what you might be able to do as employers better. And I feel very fortunate to be on the panel here with Kelly and Dr. Krishna today. And our meeting several months ago, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So thank you for having me.
Very good. Thank you. And as I mentioned, I'm with Sunbeam Family Services. We have mental health and counseling services that we provide. I have been a recipient of mental health counseling. In fact, Morale and I have shared stories, and he's counseled with me. He's also served as an expert witness for me in one particular case. And as a lawyer that practiced in the employment area, like Peter, I see this a lot, balancing rights and responsibilities. And oftentimes, mental health issues in the workplace are the elephant in the room. We're afraid to mention it. We're afraid to mention it if it involves us or a family member. We're afraid because we might do something wrong talking about or trying to deal with a mental health issue of one of our employees. But all of us either have personal firsthand experience or probably family-related experience with issues of mental health. And I think all of us here have talked about that this morning. And so Ted is going to speak to us by videotape and talk about how he became interested in the field of mental health and started the Colby Foundation. Peter, we're going to direct this question first to you. Interesting, Ted uses the word difficult for the employer and difficult for the patient, and yet he's talking about an employee. And so an employer is faced with some conflicting responsibilities, and you kind of alluded to this in your preface. There's a responsibility to the company to make sure that people are productive and doing their job, and yet there's a desire to be compassionate and caring for the employee. There's also considerations like the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Family Medical Leave Act, maybe even workers' compensation if it's a job-related mental issue. So talk to us a little bit from an employer's standpoint, Peter. How do you reconcile all of these conflicting demands from an ethical perspective for an employer?
Well, we have a little bit different approach than what most companies would take at Hobby Lobby. You know, first of all, you all have to deal with the stinking lawyers, okay?
Objection.
I resemble that remark. But we really have to deal with the law, like Jim said, the ADA, and how we're going to approach that. And there's this struggle of also being compassionate to the problems that people might have. The reason I say we're unique at Hobby Lobby is because we have a chaplain's office, and we have 3 chaplains on staff, 4 chaplains available. And so we've set something up where, like most of you probably have an employee assistance program or some program that if an employee comes forward needing some kind of help. And in our case, and this is something we've tried to be as compassionate as we possibly can be, to give that person an opportunity before they get selected on a random drug test to come forward and say, I have a problem. So they can come forward to their manager or not. They can come forward to the Human Resources Department and say, I want to avail myself of the Employee Assistance Program. That automatically protects them as long as they follow some procedures. We get them some counseling. We look at a plan to help them out, and if they will follow that, they can do that. And during that year while they are in recovery, if if they're subjected to any tests or things like that, they'll be okay. Their job is protected. They can also say, you know, I don't think I want to do that. And we give them the opportunity, if they want to go to our chaplain's office. And the chaplain is completely separate from our company. I mean, they're part of our company, but from our employee assistance program. And they're not protected from their job. So if they get tested during that period of time while they decide to go do something, they could still lose their job. However, nobody would know, and the chaplain's office will set them up, and we'll pay for 5 counseling sessions, and we'll try to help them find places for recovery. All other types of mental illness as well. If they can, we will do what we can to help them for a period.
And one of the things that I think I hear Peter saying is Hobby Lobby, and I'm sure many of your companies are proactive. We want to get ahead of this, not just deal with the issue when it presents itself, either with an absenteeism problem or some other issue in the workplace, an outburst of anger. But it's difficult to create an environment where people believe what the written policy says. So when Peter says your job is protected if you self-report, what the employees want to know is, are they living that out, or is that just on paper? So you've got to walk the talk and actually implement and do the proactive things that Peter's talking about. Okay. All right, I think Ted has another video clip for us, and he's talking, I think, in this segment about hiring people with mental health challenges. So Ted is saying something that Commissioner Terri White, who's the head of the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Department here in the state, says every time I hear her speak, is to treat mental health and addiction issues like we would treat diabetes or some other serious health concern. And yet there's a reluctance to do that, or an awkwardness about how we do that. Kelly, can you kind of talk about that in your experience? How do we begin that process of dealing with mental health and addiction issues as we would any other health concern?
I wrote my personal story of myself and my son about 4.5 years ago on Mother's Day in the top position of the Sunday Oklahoman. And I did that because I was angry. My son was sick, and I would have parents come up, parents come up to me, and they would ask about my other child, but they wouldn't ask about Eric. And that made me mad. I was like, if my son had cancer, you would ask about him first, and then you'd probably bring me a nice casserole. So it just made me angry because we were dealing with a disease. And really in the workplace too, we don't want to talk about addiction, and it just carries so much shame. But the way you deal with shame is to elevate the conversation and raise the level of awareness and educate the public to where people will talk about it. Because some people are like, I can't believe you openly admit in front of 300 people that your son is struggling with addiction. And he's good today. That's what I always say. We take it a day at a time. But it's about talking about it. And so we were willing to put ourselves out there and talk about it. But, you know, we've had employees, too, who've struggled with different things. Maybe a reporter covers a particular beat that has a lot of trauma involved or death and darkness. And after a while, their life situation has changed. Maybe they became a parent or something. And they can't do that job anymore. But they're great. You know, and if we focus on people's talents and their strengths instead of their shortcomings, maybe we can be more accommodating in that. But it's mostly about the ability to talk about it. And first and foremost, I always say, be a human.
All right. And sometimes for some of us, it's having that courage to kind of take a bit of a leap. I'm sure when you wrote that column on Mother's Day, and it was the leading above the fold headline, there was some concern or apprehension to some degree. Here I'm putting it out for everyone to know this issue, and yet you had the courage to do that. And Peter and Morale and I've talked about that too. So one of the things we hope that you will do is have the courage to speak about it. We have a little video on our Sunbeam website that talks about joining the conversation. It's a difficult thing to do. Sometimes you have to push yourself over that speed bump of hesitation and have the courage to speak, but I think that lessens the stigma of it. Morale, you've dealt with both personal issues and companies who have tried to deal with mental health challenges in the workplace. What advice do you have for employers who are trying to negotiate this uncertain sea?
The best advice I can give to employers is to see the mental illness as a physical illness. And I'll give you the reason why. If with addiction, if 100 people took a glass of wine today or a narcotic pain pill right now, 80 of us will go to bed, have a nice time, go to bed, next morning go to work. About 20 of us that have genetic predisposition will have subtle changes happening in the reward centers of the brain tonight, affecting their thinking, their behavior, their perceptions, and their joy, ever so slightly, permanently. And these 20 will continue to have problems in being able to cope with life without something to numb themselves or something to make them up or down or sleepy or numb. And that eventually becomes the only pursuit of pleasure in their life is through the drug or the alcohol. And so they lose their life, their relationships, their jobs, their earning capacity, their status in society, and their own self-esteem. And that becomes addiction. And we are paying a very heavy price by not seeing them as brain disorders. They are no different than diabetes. They are no different than heart disease. What's the most common time we have the heart attacks in Oklahoma City? Monday morning, between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the morning. What's the most common time you have heart attacks in Tokyo, Japan? Monday morning, between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the morning. By the time we are having Monday morning heart attack, they already had theirs last night. Does the heart know when to have heart attack? No, it's a muscle. The brain is the one that controls the rest of the body. And we poorly understand the brain as a world, as a universal phenomenon. It's beginning to be changing in the last decade. Tremendous advances have happened that are helping us in designing the treatments in a more appropriate, coherent, cogent way. Mental illness, same thing. The reason why there is so much fear about talking about mental illness, you don't bake a cake for somebody coming back from treatment with mental illness, or blow balloons, or celebrate them coming back, but we do that for people with breast cancer, with heart attack, with appendectomy. We celebrate their coming back to work. We don't do that for mental illness. Why? We don't know what these illnesses are all about. We don't know what to talk to them about. We don't know how to deal with them. We don't know what pressures they're having. We don't know how to communicate with them or understand them. And that's what I would like employers to do, is to really have an educational, self-revealing, developmental program for each employment place where we understand what the reality of these diseases are and how do you identify them, how do you help these people, and how can you find the right resources, and what advocacy do we need to take in the community to help these individuals that happen to have brain disorders. In my dictionary, there's nothing called mental illness and addiction. They're all brain disorders. They're all brain disorders. For lack of a better word, for centuries we use the word mental illness, and that has created so much stigma in the world.
You talked about resources, Morale. If someone, either from a human resource standpoint or from an individual employee standpoint, wanted to learn more about this, where would they go?
There are a number of good resources available. We have 2 pages of resource available in your handout. You can achieve a lot of purpose of what you want to do by going through that and picking out. I'll give you an example. There is a wonderful resource called mentalhealthfirstaid.org. mentalhealthfirstaid.org. And they have local Oklahoma educators trained in helping employees understand about mental illness in a fairly in-depth manner, very, very comprehensive, but very easy to understand. not only understand them, how do you recognize them? How do you respond to them? What do you say to them? And how do you help a person that's in acute distress? And there are many other resources available. Oklahoma Department of Mental Health has several programs available. And I would like you to consider inviting some of these educational endeavors into your corporations, so we'll all serve our citizens much better. And also the productivity. You know, mental illness is nothing to be afraid of. People that get treatment for mental illness, I've seen for 45, 50 years, over and over and over and over. Those that get treatment, proper medication, proper therapy, proper follow-up, proper aftercare, they tend to do as well as any other treatment in medicine for diabetes, for heart disease, for hypertension, for kidney disease. Sometimes even better than what you get in rest of the so-called physical illnesses. So I would recommend highly that we consider doing that. We have to change our perspective about understanding the brain disease, which is the most important organ in the body. It weighs only 3 pounds, about 2% of body weight. It consumes 20% of our blood supply and oxygen. It controls literally every cell in the body. We're talking about illness right now. There's a host of developments happening in an exciting way, how we, all of us here, whether we have mental illness or not, can enhance our brain skills to improve our health in a very major way. Brain skills like mindfulness, they enhance our immunity, they decrease our inflammation in the body, thereby decrease the incidence of diseases. In fact, some of the Harvard studies recently show that they even slow down the aging process. We can rewire the brain, and you can learn skills how you can do that. And in fact, many of these preventive things are so helpful in preventing or minimizing the incidence of disease. Because most people with mental illness are born with a genetic predisposition, just like diabetes. You're born with a genetic predisposition. On the top of the environment, what we eat, how we deal with stress, what else is going on in our life determines when we have diabetes or not. Same thing with mental illness, and same thing with addiction. We are born with a genetic predisposition, but whether it's exposed itself as a disease or not depends on multiple other factors. Some of them are very controllable and modifiable and malleable.
All right, thank you. And I think it starts with each of us making the decision, somebody else is not going to do it, I'm going to need to do it in my workplace, and so I'll check mentalhealthfirstaid.org, I'll talk to somebody in human resources, we'll put together a lunch and learn so we can at least be better informed. And Kelly, I saw you kind of nodding as Morale was talking. You have some additional thoughts on that?
I think it's also really important to look at your insurance plans and see what you're offering your employees. Because 7 days of treatment that is not going to do anybody any good, especially for addiction. You need like 90 days of treatment at a minimum. So those are challenging things to struggle with, you know, giving somebody that amount of time off. But if you look at your costs, your medical costs, and look at the number of emergency room visits that can also be related to addiction and mental illness. If you look at the #1 prescribing drug, you might find that it's a pain pill prescription. And the costs, you can mitigate those costs with good solid treatment, yet many policies do not cover that well.
So that's a great piece of advice. Check your insurance or talk to human resources about that, and check to see whether or not your employer provides an EAP. I was surprised in researching about the EAPs that we offer at Sunbeam to see the statistics that show how impactful to the bottom line having an EAP is. It decreases absenteeism, it promotes productivity. This is not just a touchy-feely, be kind to employees thing. This returns to the bottom line, so that's always a good thing to have in your pocket when you're talking to people about adopting a program like this.
Jim, if I could, you know, everybody here has been touched by either mental illness or drug or alcohol addiction. I'll bet if I asked you to raise your hands, everybody would probably raise their hands. Somewhere in our families, we are all touched by this. I would also say that somewhere in your human resources department families, people are touched by this too. and in your managers and in your ownership. But like Dr. Krishna said a moment ago, these are the things that have a stigma that we don't talk about. So what we need to talk about, what you need to talk about, is how this really has impacted your life to your employer. Maybe not with respect to this particular employee, but maybe you have a story that you can tell to bring it home to them. And when Kelly mentions about the cost, that's huge. You can do all the things in the world to lead this person into treatment, but if they can't afford it, what do you do? So seriously, I mean, talk about this. Look at this. Look at the bottom line. Look what it takes to try to get somebody into treatment and get them the help that they need. It truly is, like Jim said, it truly is an investment that will go way beyond the bottom line. It's extremely important that you have this conversation with the owners of your company because would they treat this person any differently than a good employee who might have heart disease or cancer for that matter? And I know there's the other side of this. You've got to have your productivity. You've got to have people there to keep things going. We all understand that. But think of it in a different term now. Don't think of it as somebody who is a drunk or a druggie or has mental illness. Let me tell you a quick story. So not long ago, I had somebody come to me and said, I've got an employee who I think is in the early stages of Alzheimer's. And this employee was about 60 years old and was becoming extremely forgetful, had been a long-time employee with us, and this was a struggle. What do you do? This person couldn't even hardly do their job, or you tell them one thing and they'd come back an hour later, and I mean, it's really, really, really tough. And so we set it up so that the person would try to at least get some evaluations and things like that, and truthfully, she was pretty close to wanting to retire anyway. And so she made the decision to go ahead and retire. A week later, she was diagnosed with Lyme's disease. I don't know if you heard about Chris Christopherson, but they thought he had Alzheimer's too. And just recently, it was found out that he had Lyme's disease. That's just a little side note. Think about that. If somebody, my wife's going to tell me I have Lyme's disease probably. But think about that. And think about it differently. Get outside the box, especially with respect to mental illness and drug and alcohol abuse.
Yeah, great.
I just want to make one point.
Sure.
Those chief financial officers who are interested in the bottom line, it is a fact that people with untreated mental illness or addiction will have more medical problems, between 40 to 50% more hospital and more medication and more doctor visits than an average person under treatment. And that's a very important fact to remember, that treatment does help your bottom line and help the person also.
Yeah, and it's like we've talked about, the analogy to physical issues. Prevention is cheaper and better, and so if we can get ahead of the curve and deal with these issues early on, the better it is for the individual as well as the company. Kelly, before we watch Ted's last video clip, I want to go back to your casserole comment, because sometimes we may have been in a situation where either a person we know through the grapevine has had an absence because of depression or anxiety disorder, or they have a son or a daughter with a mental health challenge or an addiction issue. So what would you say to a coworker who doesn't want to put you in an awkward spot but would like to be supportive? What kinds of things would you like to have seen people do?
One of the things that I mentioned that in my story that I wrote about people not asking about my son, and it's amazing how many people have taken that to heart, even at work. People just periodically say to me, "How's your son? How's your son?" And it's okay to ask someone how they're doing. I'm very blessed. I work for a wonderful employer, and they understand that I might call them at 7 o'clock in the morning and say, "I've got an emergency, I'm leaving town." And they're supportive of that. So it's not only the person who is struggling with it, but it's their family member who's struggling as well, and recognize they need your support as well. So again, it's just about being supportive and asking people, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do to help? And maybe you can step up when somebody needs to be away from the office and you could take care of something for them. It means the world to me that not only I work for a great company, but I have a great team, and I know they'll step up any given day.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, the thing I've probably heard most often in my career as a lawyer is, I don't know what to say. And my response often is, then listen. You could hardly ever get in trouble listening. My mom used to tell me, shut up every chance you get. And probably with good reason. But if there's a situation at work or even with a family member and you don't know exactly what to say, then just offer to listen. How are you doing? Asking open-ended questions is a good way to handle that. Now, let's cue up Ted's.
I think a simple message is non-judgmental acceptance and compassion. It's very simple to remember. Non-judgmental acceptance and compassion.
Good. Great phrase. All right, let's see Ted's final video. Dr. Krishna, let me ask you to comment on Ted's reference to the incidence of violence being a small percentage of the population that struggles with mental health issues. Is that a valid observation?
Absolutely. Science shows that it's very minimal, extremely small risk. You are very unlikely to see the serious illness like schizophrenia routinely at your workplace. You are more likely to see depression, anxiety disorder, PTSD, addiction, fears, and so on and so forth. These are problems that you can easily have a discussion after you learn what to talk and what to say. And the fears about schizophrenia is unfounded. It's very minuscule. And also, when the violence happens, it's usually a combination of not only serious mental illness, but also severe drug abuse combination. That's when the violence tends to happen.
Right. And most often untreated mental health
Exactly.
issues or substance abuse
You're right.
issues.
Yeah.
All right, so Peter and Kelly, as employers, you have a legitimate concern about violence in the workplace or outbursts of anger, some things that could result from a mental health disorder. How do you, as employers, deal with that, the desire to make sure that the workplace is safe and that people with mental health issues are not disrupting the workplace or productivity for others? How do you balance those two things? Kelly, start with you.
You know, I don't know who knows what our threat is these days for violence in the workplace. Is it an external terrorist? Is it within? I think it's the world we live in now that we all have to be aware. Anytime anybody feels uncomfortable in the workplace, you should always encourage them to talk about it and initiate any action you need to. But I think all of us, no matter where we work or what we do, need to be aware of our surroundings, and fellow employees with mental illness may be the least of our concerns.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Peter?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. When we have our system where you can either go through the EAP or through the chaplain services, if the person decides to go through the chaplain services, they're not protected, but nobody knows about it except the chaplain's office, because chaplain's office, there's a firewall. They never talk to us at all. Total protection. And we as a company have decided to accept that risk because that risk is so low. And the risk I'm talking about is the danger to other employees or the danger to themselves. Now, the chaplain does have a legal responsibility if they believe they're going to be a danger to themselves or a danger to somebody else. They have a legal responsibility to come forward, and they will. But the chances of it are so slim, it's rarely that it's going to happen. So don't get too afraid. That's the problem here, is we're just so afraid of the legal consequences with these things, and it's just so rare. And so you make the decisions based upon the risk reward. What truly is the risk? And yeah, you can sit up here, or your HR people or your lawyer could sit up here and say, all you need is one. You know, I get it, and so do you. But, you know, the reality of the situation is take some risk. Try to figure out a way to take some risk so that the company is protected and so that you're helping somebody else.
All right.
I want to give an example. I have practiced for over 45 years or so. Yeah, of the thousands and thousands of people I've seen in the last 4.5 decades, both in England and here, I could count on only 1 or 2 people that had any significant violent tendencies. And that's that rare. That rare. That you should take it out of your dictionary. Instead, focus on how can we connect with them, how can we understand them, how can we, you know, gently encourage them to get treatment and encourage that process.
Okay, very good. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to give you an opportunity if you have questions you want to pose. I'll either try to run a microphone out to you, or you can use your outdoor voice to make sure that our panelists hear your question. But I want to give our panelists one last question to ponder and pontificate on, and it's this. So we are OK Ethics, and we try to live our lives according to an ethical standard. What ethical standards come into play for us as employers or as fellow employees in dealing with mental health issues in the workplace? Kelly?
I think, to me, it goes back to be a human. I think if you put people first and act with kindness and sincerity and a non-judgmental, compassionate, what else did you say, Morale? Acceptance. I think it's that.
Okay, really?
My journey has been pretty rocky but very fruitful. And the only message I gave to myself when I began this career was to see my own mother in every person that's coming through my door to seek help. And that was the only standard I held on to. And I had to fight with insurance companies to get coverage for them. I had to fight with a number of issues about this, but it has been a very fruitful journey for me. Just see your own brother and your mother or your father or your child in every person that has addiction or mental illness, the brain disorders. Also, what's on the horizon in the science is going to clarify the answers about ethics very easily. I'll give you 2 scientific developments, exciting ones. One is the so-called CRISPR technology. Basically, with the chemical scissors, it takes away the unhealthy part of a gene that's causing disease, and it can insert a healthy part of the gene and put it back in the body, and the disease is cured. That discovery was made about 1.5 years ago, and the first patient that was applied to was a 1-year-old baby in England with a certain form of leukemia, and was completely cured with the CRISPR technology. It's breathtaking. It's going to revolutionize medicine, agriculture, what we eat, everything we know, because it's like taking God's power into your own hands to correct the problems that we can correct. So couple that with that discovery, look at the recent discovery 3 months ago that schizophrenia, one of the most severe forms of mental illness, is dependent upon the abnormalities in 8 specific genes. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, within our lifetime, we will see that in that illness, those specific dysfunctions will be cut out with these chemical scissors, and more healthier aspect of the genes will be put in, and they will be cured of this illness. And will we have any ethical problem at that point to treat them as diseases? Will we have the same discussion we're having today if that advance came today? Something to think about.
Yep. I first heard about the CRISPR technology on Radiolab podcast, and so if you're interested in that, it's really a fascinating development. And I think it will help us do a better job putting mental health issues on the same platform as physical issues. Okay, Peter, ethical standard?
Yeah, I think I've kind of touched on that with respect to the risk-reward aspect of it, and even at Hobby Lobby, we take that little risk, and what's the ethics, and maybe that small percentage of that person coming back and causing harm to themselves or to somebody else. And, we're going to take the risk. and we think it's the right thing to do. And I can parrot what Kelly said. We just have to be loving. We have to be caring. And if it's difficult for you, because maybe you have some of this in your life already and you're extremely angry about it, I get that. And if that's the case, would you be angry if they had cancer or diabetes? Think of it in those terms. There is hope. And there are lots of things that we're doing in this state to be able to give you a resource. Like I said earlier, can you listen to him all day long? It's just great, you know, it makes me smile. And that's because there's hope. There's so much that we have to do. And I've got to say this, Jim. The reason I said I was going to tell you why we're all together. We're together because these two people, along with a couple others, have had a vision. And the vision is for a world-class treatment center right here in Oklahoma. And the purpose of this is to help those people that we're talking about today. And it is being birthed as we speak. And so there will be opportunities for you, for your employees to help your employees through these problems. But it is going to happen, and you just have to have hope.
Morale and I met after I wrote my story, and then it kind of grew from there. Jim joined us, Reggie Whitten, Terri White, Peter, and a group of us worked together for a few years talking about this conceptually, because I've driven my son all over the country. We've had treatment in Florida, Texarkana, Oklahoma, Colorado, and the added expense of having to travel out of state and the complication of him being in another place and getting on his feet and building a support system. But then when you try to transfer that back home, it presents all kinds of challenges. So we went, as an independent group, we went to Integris and asked them to come on board. And we took it before their board, and they said unanimously yes. So what we're planning is a center off I-35 in Edmond. It's between 2nd and 15th where Integris Edmond is. And it will be 90 days. We will work with people. We understand it can be challenging, but our best recommendation is 90 days. And we've been attempting to work with insurance companies as well. But this is something that you can take back to your employers and look at your own plans and look at your own. I know many self-insure. But this will be a game changer in our state, and it's for the whole state. We have funders from Tulsa. I mean, this is a statewide project because I am embarrassed. When I looked up and our family needed help, Oklahoma let me down. And again, that's something I just was not going to put up with.
So don't make Kelly mad.
Yeah. Well, don't make the angry mother mad. The name of it will be Arcadia Trails, and it'll be out by Lake Arcadia. So it's something we're all very excited about, and we work very hard on.
Very good. All right, any questions that you might have that you'd like to pose to our panelists? Just raise your hand. And all right. Raleigh, would you like to engage in a moment of self-promotion and talk about your book?
Since we are not allowed to do self-promotion, I will defer that to Kelly Fry.
Morale, the reason he gave it to me is because he twisted my arm enough, and I had to help him write his book. So it was a beautiful story. Morale. His mother was a wonderful person, and getting to know him, I've grown to love her and his family. But it was what a journey it was for me to get to sit with him once a week and work on this book together. And he's been through great challenges in his life. As a small child, he had a world-class mother who took care of the school children in the neighborhood and worked with everyone. But Morale came home from school one day, and he looked into the backyard, and his mother was setting herself on fire. So you can see that that is a person who has faced deep sadness and adversity and turned it into a positive. And we've all benefited from that. So he's been in search of answers for his mother, and as his studies went on, I believe now it would have been seasonal affective disorder. So, and she suffered from that at a very young age. Another night she did wake up and Morelli saw her walk out the door and he followed her. And he followed her down and she walked through town and then she walked into the river. And the water was getting deeper and Morelli reacted, as so many children would, to save their mother. And he went in after her, and as the water came up to where he was and he was starting to struggle, her mother instinct took over and she turned and grabbed her little boy and went back to the shore. So terrible, tragic events that he's taken, internalized, processed, and now we all benefit from his pain.
And the title of the book is Vibrant.
He's telling me, vibrant,
Right.
from India to Oklahoma City, to heal and be whole. I swear I really helped.
Just not with a title.
Earlier he spoke about mindfulness, and he has an article that I would recommend all of you reading, and Shannon has agreed to put it up on the website so that you can get it and look at it. I found one thing really interesting. You said it could slow the aging process. So if you read mindfulness, you don't have to do Botox.
Okay.
It is true that if you do learn the brain skill called mindfulness, it's not a religion, it's a brain skill we are all born with. Something interesting happens. Normally, you and I lose, after the age of 45, 85,000 brain cells a day. By the age 65, 15% of us will have Alzheimer's. By the time we're 85, 1 out of 2 of us will have Alzheimer's. But this work with mindfulness is showing from Harvard, from other reputable places, that you actually increase the brain gray matter density within 6 months to 12 months. You can see in the brain scans. And that is stunning. Nothing in medicine that we've known, no medicine, no surgical procedure, has been known to increase the gray matter in the brain like a basic skill we're all endowed with by the Creator. And that's really stunning.
And that
I will send the article to Shannon in case you're interested. She can email that to you if you have access to that one. Yeah, thank you.
That's part of the explanation for why Morelli is so smart, is he's been doing this, just storing up gray matter. All right. Other questions? Yes, Bob.
I wonder if you could enlighten us a little bit on what relationship, if any, there is to mental illness and radicalization that we hear about way too much.
Okay, the relationship between, if I'm hearing you correctly, the relationship between mental illness and radicalization. Morelli, you're probably the best one to tackle that.
Yeah, I have not worked with anybody that's been radical, and the only angry person I met was Kelly Fry.
But we're all bringing her a casserole.
But you can imagine a certain group of people who feel all alone, not connecting with the world, feeling aloof, with very poor self-esteem, have no goals, no passion, nothing in life to look forward to, and nobody to connect with. And these radical ideas are easy to plant in those minds, just like religious ideas, just like any other ideas, because they're kind of fertile ground for that, and that applies not only to mental illness, it applies to a lot of lonely people that do not have any connection in their lives. It doesn't have to be mental illness. It can be anybody that has very poor self-esteem, no sense of identity, and no sense of purpose. And this is creating purpose. If you look at these radical people that have done bad things, they don't even know their religion completely. They have very superficial knowledge before they did all these acts, horrific acts on innocent people. So that's all I know.
Okay, very good. Got time for at least one more question? Yes.
Arcadia Trails, number one,
They do stay full, and it will start with 40 beds in the residential unit, but the building, the main building for where the therapy will take place, is built much larger to be more accommodating for patients in the future. And yes, initially it is drug and alcohol. So, but it's really a three-legged stool where we believe that the best treatment happens is with the mental illness, the trauma, and the addiction. And so if you're addressing all three of those components and for a longer length of stay, you will have a higher rate of success. But remember, it's a chronic disease, okay? So there is relapse periodically, and for different patients and clients, it'll be different. So we'll have an ongoing support as well, a continuum of care, because that is very critical in that.
And this will be a fairly unique approach to this co-occurring disorders that Kelly was talking about. Think of it as three intersecting circles. And oftentimes, treatment facilities only deal with either the mental health issue or just the substance abuse issue. This facility is designed to deal with the three: trauma, mental health, and substance abuse.
This is an Oklahoma center developed by Oklahomans for future generations of Oklahomans. So please think about how you possibly could get involved, get in touch with Kelly or Jim or myself or Peter. And it could be, you may have people that really are interested in funding this. Or it could be that at some point when it opens, your employers might be interested in getting appropriate treatment for the employees and might be an advocate for proper treatment for the patients. So there could be a number of ways in which we can be involved to make this truly a world-class institution. So we're not supposed to promote things, but this is really for you. This is your own project.
Very good. All right, last thing I'm going to say before I turn it over to Shannon is this. Sometimes you hear a topic like this and you feel overwhelmed. There's so much that needs to be done. Where would I as an individual begin? And I always encourage people to think in concentric circles. Begin with yourself and others immediately in your sphere of influence, family members, people you work with, and then work out in concentric circles. But we can begin today with ourselves. So overcoming the stigma in our own minds about mental health, dealing with those, becoming educated, going to mentalhealthfirstaid.com, and then build out in concentric circles from there. I want to thank our panelists and Ted in absentia for his contributions. And Shannon, I'll turn it back over to you.
I want to extend a special appreciation for our panelists for their courage, because this obviously touches their lives in a very personal way. And so to share their stories, which were difficult. So we want to give you an extra round of applause for being here today and bringing this to the forefront. So thank you. We will look forward to seeing you next month for Johnny Quinn, our Olympic champ, and I think it'll be interesting. See you then.